Hello and welcome to Concert Pipeline. I'm Steve Jones. Today on the program, we have an interview with Dan Navarro. I had a chance to talk to Dan Navarro and we had a really great conversation. Stay tuned to the end because he played a song for the program also, which was really cool. Dan has a new album out called Horizon Line, which was produced by Jim Scott, who he's worked with a lot on previous albums that he did with his friend and former bandmate Eric Lowen. We talk about their friendship, and and he goes pretty deep in terms of that conversation. Also, I mean, something that was pretty touching to me. And if you want to hear that piece solely, I popped that up on Concert Pipeline's Facebook and Instagram pages, so you can check those out online, those social media places. We'll get into the interview with Dan in just a few minutes. Before we do, I'll catch you all up on what's been going on in my world. There's some shit. We'll start with the shit. It's literal shit, because the other day I had to go to my daughter's school for a parent-teacher conference, where I could meet her teacher. She's at a new school. I didn't know how that worked or anything. So I had to reach out to the school and get some more information. Apparently I could just drop into any of her classes. There's one teacher I wanted to talk to in particular. So I went into that class I had to take my son with me, because he was with me. So I did that. I left home, did the parent-teacher conference, and then went and picked my daughter up from school. I'm sorry, not school, from her tutoring, and went home. And so I was gone like an hour and a half. And in that time, I had left my dog, Basil, inside. And he's getting old. He's a Husky Shepherd, about 10 and a half years old. And I mentioned it before on the program that I didn't even know if he was going to make it to this house that I moved into in May. So any time on top of that is a success. But when we got back, my daughter went in the house and stepped in a pile of shit. She was less than pleased. I'd had this experience several times, with Basil, but the thing that made this really sad and interesting is that there was not just one pile of shit or two or three. There were about 8 piles of shit, 8 3/4 of normal size, piles of shit. It was enough for like 4 days at least. And it was all over the house. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, what is going on? I can only imagine that he had anxiety about us leaving, doesn't like that too much, and not taking him with him, and tying that into the old age. Thinking that's probably what happened, but it's like, man, if this is going to keep happening, I'm not sure, how much time we have left with our boy Basil. Like I said, he's been with us for a long, long time, longer than my son's life, and almost as long as my daughter's. So, it's going to be completely different without him when that time comes. But push through it and make our way there together. Right now, we still got some good time with him though, and we'll enjoy the time that we got. I'm not going to be one of those pet owners who, draws it out and pumps thousands of dollars into trying to make, their dog's life last another month or two or anything along those lines. I want to make sure he's happy and that we're happy as well, right? Once that quality life is gone, it's kind of time to wrap things up. And I don't just mean that for my dog. I mean that for myself too. I kind of think 85 is the age I want to go at, and somewhere around there. And once I can't control myself, don't have my thoughts about me or my wits, and it's not enjoyable to live anymore, I want to go. I'm like, I'm good here. I've done my time. I've enjoyed my life as much as I could, done what I set out to accomplish in most cases, hopefully, and be able to move on and not be a burden to my family. So that's kind of where I stand on that. And I've authorized my buddy Joe to, drop me off a cliff or take me out in whatever way is necessary, if the time comes and he outlives me. So I'm going to do everything I can to not make that time soon, though, including hitting that Peloton every day, getting out for walks with the dog every day, just taking care of myself, eating as good as I can. I struggle there sometimes, but I do what I can. So that's that piece. Also, we've been talking about Andrew McMahon recently, a lot in the program, and it should come as no surprise that I'm a fan of him by either of these, pieces on my wall, Everything in Transit Here, and then the concert that my buddy Joe, his wife Jackie, and I went to about a month ago. And so I found out that Andrew McMahon was going to do a pretty intimate show in Los Angeles in 2 weeks, and it's like 150 people, so really, really small. And he didn't even announce it online. It was just, I found out through his fan club. So they were the only ones who really found out right away. And then the word may have traveled a little bit from there, but pretty small show. And he's going to be playing a new song. So I talked to my buddy John, who lives down in Los Angeles, about 2 miles from the venue apparently, and to see if he wanted to go, and he said he was in. So you know what, I said, let's do this. And when tickets went on sale, I bought tickets. So I'm going to Andrew McMahon in a week and a half, even though I just saw him a month ago. And I think I'm gonna fly down there. I was planning on driving originally. I'm like, I'll just champ it out, listen to some podcasts, rock out to some music or what have you. But the cost is negligible, between driving and flying at this point. And it's probably just easier and better to fly and get down there that way. So I'm gonna go down to LA for that show. And funnily enough, I'll tell you who we have on the program next week is an artist named Drew McManus. Not to be confused with Andrew McMahon, but I got an email, I think that same day, from a publicist about Drew McManus going to be in San Francisco, and would I like to interview him at the show on October 12th? I'm like, well, actually, I'll be at LA seeing Andrew McMahon at that same time, but we can have him on the program. So we're going to do that. And one last point on the Andrew McMahon piece also was that same day that I bought the tickets, Andrew did a hang with his fan club, which I'm a part of. I support the artists I'm a fan of, and so I went to the live stream hang. He played a couple of songs live, and he allowed people up on video to ask some questions and what have you. I wasn't even gonna hop up or anything. I was just gonna observe, and my daughter was like, "No, hey, raise your hand, Dad," and so I did. And I was the last person selected to hop on, and I got to talk to Andrew again. And here's a little clip of that.
I see an old friend, Steve Jones, on the screen here.
You do. Andrew, how are you doing?
Mr. Concert Pipeline himself. How are you, sir?
You know it. We got to get you back on when the album comes out,
Hell yeah, I would love that. How have you been?
I've been good. I wanted to thank you for the San Francisco show. It was great seeing you, and you come into the back of the venue, and you danced with me and my buddy Joe and his wife, and I mean that made meant the world to them. They were so stoked to have that interaction with you. So your music has spoke to our generation. It's a voice of our generation, and obviously I grew up on your music, so I really wanted to thank you for that. Yeah, and so my big question, I guess I get that in one of the last ones, but I was so stoked to see you on stage. I wasn't there, but to see you on stage with the SoCo guys, and I wanted to know what that meant to you and kind of that experience was for you. And also, I'm coming down to the LA show, so excited to see you in a couple weeks again.
Awesome. It was really magical. Like I think weirdly, because I've done like a lot of work on myself over the last couple years. Like I've been doing a lot of work on myself for a long time, right? But I feel like during COVID, just a huge part of that for me was to really try and make sense of so many eras of my life, and to find some peace, and to really, like, as I kind of re-entered the world and started going back on the road post all of this, or as post as we can be at the moment, like, I think because I feel sort of so grounded, and I have made peace with all of that in the biggest way, that it really was the first time in all the years since we sort of went on hiatus, and like in permanent hiatus or whatever, we're just the night from top to bottom, not just being on stage with those guys, but being on stage with my bandmates who have been with me, since Jack's Mannequin. and then to have the Something Corporate guys come out and do a set, it was just like, it just felt like this sort of like, if it was the last thing I saw after I died or something, that it would have felt right, and so to be there on that stage with them and so many of the friends and family who nurtured us when we were kids trying to make it, we did this. They came together and played the Dear Jack benefit with me years ago, and we did a reunion in 2010. But I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, it was like, this was really the moment for me where I was just like, all I had was gratitude. All I had was like good memories with me on that stage, and I think we all felt that, and the fact that it was a surprise, so there was so much less pressure than if it was announced. I think there was just this really beautiful freeness to the whole thing. That if I could bottle it, I would. It was a special night from top to bottom, and was super grateful for it, and it felt awesome.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad you had that moment, and hope I know we don't expect any tours of it coming up, but hopefully hopefully we get to see it again sometime. It'll be great.
Yeah. So Andrew McMahon remembered me, and I really wanted to send that message to him. The video is in portrait mode, and I'm really not a fan of that, but it was the only way to fit his video and my video well on the screen and be able to record it. After this clip of the interview happened, by the way, I also brought my daughter in on video and let her say hi to Andrew. She had met him when she was 4, and I reminded Andrew of that, and he was just so personable. He's such a great guy, and really cares about his fans and making that connection, and that's something that I really respect about Andrew. So was super stoked to get to talk to him again and let him know that I would be at the show down in LA. So he's been really great to me over the years, and he thanked me actually for when talking to my daughter Fern for always being so great to him in return. So it's great. It's great to have a connection with someone whose music you respect so much and is a voice of your generation. I just love it. I get shy and embarrassed a little bit, but I also don't want to miss those opportunities at the same time. So I was really grateful that moment happened. So that's my story. That's kind of where we're at, and that's what's going on in my world. I don't want to draw it out any longer right now. Let's go ahead and bring Dan Navarro in to the program. Sounding good. So how's your week been treating you so far?
It's been pretty fabulous, Steve. It's been a whirlwind of a lot of different things. I just finished up a 4-week tour. Started in the Washington, D.C. area with a program on Sirius XM, and hit basically, Annapolis, Maryland, Vienna, Virginia, Cleveland for a radio show, Ann Arbor, Michigan, then 3 shows in the Chicago area. Then went to Minnesota, where I went north in Minnesota for 4 events, up in Bemidji, then down into the Twin Cities, down as far as Orinoco. Just went through Austin to do a governance conference because I serve on multiple boards, and the topic they wanted me to speak on was leading a world-weary arts community through COVID, through good governance. And because I served on a number of boards and stuff, they wanted to hear from me. And I just got home late last night.
Yeah. Did you have some good barbecue in Austin?
I did indeed, twice. I went to Stubbs and I went to Ironworks. And Stubbs was really cool. Ironworks for me is to die for, and it turned out the hotel was right across the street. So that was my last meal in Austin was at Stubbs.
I like it. I'll tell you, I found this great place in Austin where you can have a burger with donuts as a bun, and it has guacamole on it, and it's beautiful. It's called Gordo's. It's amazing. So
I'll be looking
I'm in
for
Austin.
that.
Gotta have it.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm in a 12-step program for donuts, so.
I should probably be there. I had a couple this morning. It's dangerous. I have to Peloton just to offset, the sweet tooth that I have. It's dangerous,
Well, I don't consider loving donuts part of a sweet tooth. I consider it to be a food group myself. But
it's its own classification.
It really is.
I feel you there.
Chocolate
What's your
donuts.
favorite donut?
My favorite donut is chocolate glazed. Second favorite
Okay.
is powdered sugar. Regular old glazed donuts do it for me just fine. And I mean, I can knock off a dozen regular old glazed donuts any day of the week.
Yeah. I had a bear claw this morning and an old fashioned
Ooh.
chocolate. So,
Bear claws, apple fritters,
yep.
cinnamon rolls,
Yep.
all of it. And so I actually avoid pastries because it's the potential is for it to be pretty damaging.
It can be bad if they're around. You're like, I'll just have one or two or 10.
Yeah, it's full Lay's potato chips, but you can't have just one.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, cool. So let's talk about music a little bit. Tell me about your childhood and kind of the upbringing with music, where you got your musical taste.
Well, I came from a creative family. My father's father, who I never knew, had been a playwright and a journalist and fancied himself a composer. My mother's father played violin in amateur mariachi groups. I'm Mexican American. And so most of my family came from Mexico. My parents were born in the U.S., but they were part of a vibrant Mexican American culture, both in Los Angeles and on the Mexican border in Calexico, California, where I was raised. Dad always wanted me to play music, so when they came around school in the fourth grade and said we're starting bands and we'll give your kids classes and lessons, I signed up and I played trumpet, switched into French horn by junior high, played French horn all through high school and college at UCLA, and always sang and wanted to sing, but there were no real outlets. There was an eighth grade mixed choir, and that was the end of that for me. I sang, kind of as a dude around my senior year in high school, but my second year of college, I went out for the UCLA Men's Glee Club, and that sort of popped me into singing formally and learning how to position my voice and learning the literature of classical and folk and a number of things. I grew up on American Top 40 radio, so I always wanted to be a singer, singing the hits of the day, but singing my own. I started writing songs in my second year of college, and by then I was pushing it pretty hard, wanting to be a singer-songwriter in the, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Cat Stevens mold, because that's what was happening then. And
Yeah.
danged if I didn't get to do it. That's, it's kind of what I've looked at as the ethos that makes the most sense for me. I've done other kinds of music, and as a writer, I've done many kinds of music. I mean, I wrote a couple of hip-hop hits, but in terms of what I do, the acoustic singer-songwriter was always central to how I did it. But it came up sort of organically, always being around music and playing music. And that fundamental moment when I was in junior high school, when I was playing in a symphonic band, symphonic wind ensemble, concert band they call it, where there's clarinets and flutes instead of strings, and that feeling of the entire ensemble coursing through my body addicted me. I just went, I need to do this all the time, and it became, what drove me forward. The singing part I did for fun at home, but I
Yeah.
knew that I had a good enough voice that I always wanted to do that and be that. But it was pie in the sky until college. I realized it was closer than I thought, but it was still quite distant. I talked the talk. I tried to walk the walk when I got out of college and I got a couple songs on some records, and they didn't do very well. I started playing out little clubs and all of that. But it was much later, through a big fluke, when my big song hit, that suddenly I was in a community, and it was like, now I can really do this if I want to. And it was harder than ever, but I got lucky.
Yeah. And it was that second year of college that you got your first guitar, right?
Yes, I got my first guitar second year of college and started writing songs right away. And it was, and they were dreadful. The early songs were really pretty weak. But everybody's early songs are. You sort of,
Yeah.
That said, Eric Lowen, my late co-writer on We Belong was the sixth song he'd ever written in his entire life. And
Wow.
that's what came
So right
out
out the gate, hit.
right out of the gate.
Tell me
But
about the
part of it-
process of We Belong.
he had been starting he called me up and said, let's write together. And we were actually in the middle of a feud. We weren't really speaking. And I saw it as an olive branch, so I accepted it and went over to write with him. And he had started a chord progression. And I thought, that sounds like a song I've heard before. So I started writing a new lyric to the other song, just using it as a template. But I didn't tell him. I'm not saying, hey, that sounds like, in my head, I'm going, sounds kind of like that. So I just kind of made up a new lyric, didn't tell him. He made up a new melody. He ended up contributing some that goes, I don't really, I think where you're starting this doesn't sound like a first verse. He sat down and wrote a first verse. And the story that was outlined in the first verse was so clear, I went, yeah, I know the rest of this story. I dashed out the second verse, used what I had previously written as the third verse, and the chorus I had written down whole. I mean, I looked at it. I had gone into the session wanting to write a song that ended up with the phrase, we belong together. And so I did. I kind of wrote the chorus backwards to his music, both of our melodies, but I sang this sort of static one-note melody. And he started making up harmonies to it that moved around. And that's where whatever we deny or embrace. The original was whatever we deny or embrace. He made up a harmony that took over and became strong enough to be the melody. But we ended up bashing that baby out in 90 minutes.
Wow. Some of the best songs are just like, you don't think about it too much, right? You just,
right.
You don't overthink it. You get it and it comes out and it's natural. And
exactly.
And there it is. It lives forever.
They're on the surface ready to come out, a little bit like splinter in your skin or something. No, they really are ready to come out. And all you really have to do is trust it enough to let them out. Other songs are harder, but that particular one, again, I remember every moment of doing it. The verse that I wrote was the Close Your Eyes and Try to Sleep Now, which I hadn't written anything before it, so I imagined it was a first verse, but he just said, that doesn't really seem like a first verse. It seems more like, another verse. So he said, let me write something. And he wrote down, 20 times I tried to tell you. We sang 20 times instead of Pat, who sang many. 20 times I tried to tell you, 20 times I cried alone. And I went, yep, I get it. I know this story. So I just filled in the gaps.
Yeah. And how did Pat get a hold of it? Did she buy it from you guys? Did you have any relationship with her at all?
No, we took it to a guy in a record company at EMI Records that we knew named Jamie Cohen. He was a dear friend, and he loved it. But he wasn't able to really do anything with it. And we called him at one point saying, look, somebody really wants to cut this, and we would rather they didn't. Can you help us out by maybe, I don't know, what can you do? He says, I'm going to give it to the guy in publishing. See what he says. So he gave it over to the guy in publishing at EMI, and Tom Sturgis listened to it and didn't necessarily hear anything. He kind of let us know, there's nothing really for us here. But a couple months later, we got a call from him out of the blue, him saying, I want to do a handshake deal with you. I want to, I have an idea for a major female artist. And so we went and met him and shook hands. And then a week later, he says, it's going to be Benatar. It ended up, he managed to get it submitted with other songs into a box of tapes, and she pulled it out. She listened to it and pulled it out. I've met her several times. We don't really have a friendship. And I figure, it's working, so I'm just going to lay back.
Yeah. It worked for both of you, right? So.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it became her biggest hit and the song that she plays the most often when she does, one song on a TV show or something like that, which is really heartening. It's still, it's weird and hard to imagine what it turned into, having, come from writing it and understanding the feelings that went into writing it. But we knew it was good. We just didn't know it would do that. And when it did, we buckled our seatbelts and we were going along for a wild ride. It was pretty exciting.
What did that ride look like afterwards, after that song came out and exploded and made the 80s?
Basically, what that ride looked like was like any roller coaster ride. It was startling. It was frightening. It was definitely gratifying. But when we would hear how big it became and how not part of us it was anymore, but it was part of a larger world, that was mind-blowing. Over time, shortly, as many hits do. Over time, it's sort of diminished and it was gone, and that's all fine. But it wound up turning around at about the 10 to 12 year mark, and all of a sudden started getting used more and more and more in films and that kind of thing, commercials even. So it's been the gift that keeps on giving, and now it's been 38 years since it came out, so it's sort of drifted into the public lexicon and is something way beyond what we thought of when we first wrote it.
And you made a version for hospital workers.
We did that. Eric had passed away by then, but I did that in 2020 with Rebecca Sanford from McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts. We'd been put together by a friend, and she wanted to get the rights to a different song for a still picture video. Now, I know a little something about that, so her friend had said, well, you should call Dan, he'll help you figure that out. And we basically couldn't figure it out, mainly because the companies were slow to respond. They were all COVID lockdowns, so everything was backed up. And we sent these requests, and nobody was responding. So I said, well, I got another song, one that I control, that we can change lyrics to, and you'll get permission for a gratis use. And so we sat down on a Google Docs and wrote in real time a revised version of the song in total collaboration. She's not an experienced songwriter. She just knew what she wanted to say, and she came up with some great stuff and did a very quick recording of it, calling it We Belong to Hope, with different lyrics that really address sticking with somebody when times are hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hear from you kind of a little bit about your relationship with Eric, because I heard an interview that you did where you said, like, you wouldn't have anything if it weren't for him, right? Like your musical career wouldn't be anything without that dynamic and that work in ethic that he brought. Tell me about that.
Well, I think we live in a theoretical world of what our talents might be and where they might land. But in reality, nothing worked until we hooked up. And I think the versions of it that are, that speak to what dynamics permeate a duo relationship is that Eric was a very talented musician, but he tended not to go for the jugular as a songwriter. I was a decent musician, but I was a strong writer and would go to these places of deep emotion and sometimes conflict, but I didn't work very hard. And the early part of my career was characterized by a lot of sputters, and I would just let it sputter out and then have to figure out how to get it going again. Eric believed in daily work. So between the two of us, we were digging deep and working daily. And our output increased and the quality increased. And we knew it, so we just kept going that way. If it weren't for the fact that he'd asked me to come over that day to write with him, I would not have written with him. That we ended up with this ethos of how we pursue our job, which is, again, dig deep and work every day. That wouldn't have happened without the partnership. We would have been left to our own devices and only been half of the equation. Once we hooked up, we were rolling because we could spot each other the energies to be able to say, okay, you lead now. We'll work hard. And then we'll be in something and he'll have an idea and I go, nah, let's spin it into this and it would be more vibrant or whatever. Now also over time, we learned then from each other about how to balance those. So I became a hard worker all by myself and he became a brilliant songwriter all by himself. And then we kept working together. So everything was doubling down on these skills that we were gaining. From that standpoint, I don't see that I could have done it with anyone else, and I certainly wasn't doing it alone. So without Eric Lowen, I'm still working in advertising, writing ad copy.
Yeah, and you toured so much with him. Tell me about the dynamic of those tours. What was that like? What were some of the highlights of being on the road with Eric?
Well, being on the road with Eric usually meant that I was going to be late for something, almost everything. He was going to be in charge of making sure that, we got driven to the places we needed to drive. The dynamic with us, it was like any, band of brothers. We clicked a lot. We clashed a lot. We would bicker. We would say fine, or, as we're trying to, because we didn't pull any punches with each other. But we also were conscious of the fact that it's like, hey man, here we are. How did this happen? How did we end up? It wasn't like maybe some bands are where they're young and they're great and they make a band, they make music, and it all clicks. We were an uphill battle. We were older guys. So as we're out there, we're figuring out how do we maximize the low tour support? How do we make this 50-person audience work for us? And it was by being personable and inside the personalities and the connection with the fans, to engage with them instead of just perform for them. We both did that really early, and it clicked. And I carry it on to this day that, I'll spend time with audiences after the show. I won't hide backstage or go hang out on the bus or leave town. It's like, no, okay, we're done. I'm going to go out to the bar. And people will see, oh, there he is. Well, yeah, I'm not a movie star.
Yeah, approachable, easy to hang with and chat with, and yeah.
That's the idea. Whatever I can do to sort of bring it all down to earth is worthwhile. It feels good to me, and that's all I need. But it's turned out to be good business sense in that we've gotten people associated, we and I have gotten people associated with us who are with us for life. It's really gratifying.
Yeah, I think that one of the most beautiful things that I learned is kind of, I was prepping for our chat, is like Eric, the last song that Eric heard was the last song that you two wrote together, and that's so impactful, and what was that like for you?
It was mind-blowing. It was a perfectly symmetrical experience and fairly typical, that there would be all kinds of meaning shoved through these mundane things we were doing. We were listening to the music while he was on his deathbed, but he could have passed at any moment, or it could have been on shuffle, but instead it ran everything chronologically, and he flatlined on the very last song of the very last album we put on.
Wow.
We couldn't have planned it. And as a matter of fact, when they basically pulled his life support to allow him to die, which took about 15 minutes, to be honest, I'm sitting there going, oh man, you don't want to die on one of my songs. You really want to die on yours. And I'm sitting there looking at it going, well, there's 3 of my songs in a row, and then there's this thing at the end. Well, okay, let's just, let's see where it ends. And he flatlined right at the very beginning of that final song. And I'm just sitting there going, it couldn't have been more perfect, more symmetrical, more meaningful to have that experience of the end of the album, the end of our recording career, at the end of his life.
Hang on there, buddy. Just a couple more tracks, okay? We got to push through.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. I read that you wrote some songs for The Office. What did you write for The Office?
Well, they cut We Belong. A lot of the stuff that's cited out there is placements of We Belong, Talladega Nights or Blue Valentine, or any of those things. We Belong gets placed all over the place. So Mindy Kaling sang it in an episode called A Benihana Christmas, and she was singing it, I think, a cappella. And that's by itself weird that you find it. I'll tell you what was exciting was that there was a short that came out a few years ago called The Carmine Line. And it starred, oh my God, is it Victoria Coleman, the Oscar-winning actress? I don't know if Victoria's her first name. I hope it is.
Sure.
I will check on that. In fact, I'm going to look while we're doing this. And I didn't realize she was in it. I had heard that the short was coming out. But she's singing it in it. And I'm sitting there going, an Oscar-winning actor is singing my dang song. So that really kind of blew my mind. Let's see what we got.
That's pretty cool.
So far it's being really, it's looking, it thinks I'm in Google Drive. No Google Drive. Come on. I'll make this quick. Oops, too late. Oscar, that's the way to find her. Come on.
And
Come on. I don't know why I think it's Victoria, but I just don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah, no worries.
And it still has me in All right, so I got to kill this. It has me in Google Drive. I'm sorry to take your time with this.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Call.
I can cut the dead air part.
Yeah, good. Olivia Colman. Olivia Colman.
There we go.
Yeah, so Olivia Colman
Got
did it in the Carmine line and is singing the words to the song, and I'm going, she's an Oscar winner. If I ever meet her, I got to go, I wrote that song. And it's stranger things have happened.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I interviewed Gary Oldman like a year before he won his Oscar.
Wow.
Yeah, he did this. He actually performed at my favorite concert of all time, which was a David Bowie celebration. After David Bowie passed, it was Gary Oldman and friends, members of Bowie's band. Like 70 musicians all throughout the evening. Playing Bowie songs. It was just an incredible, magical experience to be present there and get to talk to the artists that were performing, and Gary was great too. So,
scary talented actor.
Oh, for sure. So tell me about the cruises that you do with fans. On you've done like over 20 of them, right? Like, tell me about that.
20th coming up.
Oh,
my friend
nice.
Donald Davidoff came to us with an idea of doing cruises with fans on ocean liners, where you're a small group inside this 2,000-person ship. And I didn't know him at the time. I told my manager I thought it was the worst idea I'd ever heard. I mean, why do I want to hang around with a bunch of fans on a boat in the middle of nowhere with, a bunch of old dudes in big old shorts playing shuffleboard? And I didn't realize what had happened to cruises in the ensuing years from when I was a kid, is that they'd gotten younger and more festive. And of course, you're not, against the rails or anything like that. It's a floating hotel. Well, so we really liked the idea, and it caught on. We started doing them every single year. We had a couple of years where we took small breaks, in particular when Eric's abilities to move around got bad. But we had done, we'd done maybe 12 of them by the time we hit 2009, 2008. And then when Eric retired, before he passed away, I started doing them on my own. They've become fan builders. They've become revenue builders, for darn sure. But just a way of getting close to a bunch of fans and actually becoming friends with them, or friendly with them. And friendly enough that you develop a trust because you spend days on end really with them, as opposed to just see them for a minute, hi, wave from the stage, sign something, and then go.
Right.
So we made some friendships, and we kept doing them year in, year out. Donald eventually started a whole business behind that, and he's done like 100 cruises. But as we got ready for my 20th, we decided to go big or go home, and we're doing the Danube from Nuremberg to Budapest in about 3 weeks. So I'm pretty excited about that. We'll actually leave for Europe in 9 days, and I'm not anywhere near ready. I'm going to go in about 9 days and spend a week in London, and then go to Prague for the pre-cruise, and then go Nuremberg to Budapest, and then fly back home. But we get to spend concentrated time together, get to know one another. I perform for them. I find out about their lives. We do a Q&A session where we talk about, answer questions that they're interested in, and usually some sort of themed show. But, it's become a really, really fun way to connect.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, being able to build that connection is not something, like you said, you can't just do it at a show, when people are hanging around afterwards, right? So that's really cool. What was your involvement with We Don't Talk About Bruno? That became such a big hit for that movie.
I've been doing work in film I started out in 88 singing jingles in Spanish, singing commercials. And it caught on. I started getting a lot of work doing that, and this was concurrent with We Belong, and being the pro songwriter. I mean, I started doing that work right around the time I was working with the Bangles, and also right around the time that Eric and I started playing out as a duo. So I had this third iron in the fire of doing sessions and commercials in Spanish. After about 10 years, it sort of morphed into doing voiceovers occasionally, which itself morphed into doing English language singing in movies and television shows. And it just kept growing. Really, morphing is a better word, because it didn't grow into these new areas that made it twice as big or 4 times as big. The commercials kind of went away within 10 years, and I was doing more film work and doing more voiceover work. The voiceover kind of went away, and I was doing more voice acting and doing character voices, because, I mean, I got an agent who would say, we're going to try you over here, and then something would happen. So now I do unidentifiable background noise voices on Family Guy and American Dad, which I've done for 20 years. I do what's called ADR on series like The Boys Diabolical and Ultra City Smiths and Pantheon, that's still coming. But I've also was hired to sing as part of a 12-voice group in this Disney movie. Well, we don't really know anything about it when we're doing it. It's, I looked it up going, okay, Encanto, it's got Lin-Manuel Miranda music. It's probably going to be a big old hit. And I did 2 sessions with 11 other singers with COVID protocols, so we were very spread out, individual pods separated by plexiglass, singing backing on these songs. Nobody really knew what would happen with it. I assumed that the film would be a hit, but what I didn't expect was the deep, deep connection that We Don't Talk About Bruno had, and it became a #1 single. I mean, up there with, Respect by Aretha Franklin and Beatles songs, and it's a #1 record. I've been doing this in some form or another for almost 40 years. It's my first #1. And it was pretty exciting. I mean, I'll start playing it. I didn't sing lead on it. I'll start playing it at a show, though, and people will start clapping. And it resonates. So occasionally I'll sing, it was my wedding day. But We Don't Talk About Bruno in particular just seemed to capture everybody's imagination. They put up Dos Oruguitas for the Oscar, and I think my favorite one to sing on was The Family Madrigal, because it was rapid fire and a lot of words, a lot going by you.
Yeah, what a cool experience. Well, let's talk about the new album, Horizon Line, right? So you had a chance to work with Jim Scott again, and you've worked with him many times. Tell me what he brings to your recordings and why you keep bringing him back in to work on your albums, and this one in particular.
Well, Jim is such a talented engineer on top of everything that everything he records sounds enormous, even the gentle stuff. So he makes stuff sound damn near perfect. Everything has a resonance and a fullness to it and an immediacy to it that's pretty infectious. So stuff sounds amazing. He also works fast, and I knew that from having worked with him before, that we would work in a particular method that would suit me because my time gets limited. But more importantly, you can stretch out a record for a long time. My last record took a long time to make, and I love how it came out. I worked with a really good producer, Steve Postel, who's also playing all over the new album. But I wanted to go back to the old experience. I wanted the opportunity to work with Jim one more time and tap into what we did before. I mean, after having done records in literally 1990, 93, 94, 95, 98, and 2008. So there were 6 albums I made with him. 0, 3, 4, 5, 8. 6 albums I made with him. And I'd recorded it with him a couple of times for other people. I knew what it was like to work with him, and I wanted to go recapture that experience. And I could not have made a better decision. It was, from the very get-go, it had skill, it had heart, soulfulness, a real sense of knowing what he was doing, the expertise that comes with when you've been an engineer like he is and had that kind of track record. But it was also fun to hang out with my old buddy and reminisce about the old days and then sit there and go, look at us now. What kind of, all right, so man, is this me or is this the best thing we've ever done? He goes, it's pretty damn good. Because we would work quickly to basically to show up with our A game. That is the working style that we had developed. And danged if we didn't do it. I mean, from the very first session, it had this sense of fullness and immediacy that I loved. And so it was real inspiring to keep going. And we made it relatively quickly. We took nearly a year to make it, but we worked in 2 pockets. A 12-day pocket in June, July, August of 21.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went on the road and he got busy. And then we finished it off in March, April of 22. 25 days total, start to finish. And I listened to it and I still can't quite believe it's me. I mean, it's not that it sounds differently. It's just, wow. And forgive me for being immodest, but I made a record that I'm really proud of.
It's a great album, and what I like is, I mean, it's the theme is like about pushing forward,
Correct.
but also in it you're not afraid to go back, because Come Around January's Child was a song that you wrote when you were 21. So tell me kind of about pulling that in and how that got brought into the song.
At the very tail end of live touring right before COVID in 2020, I did 2 shows in the same town, in the same venue. So I kind of needed to mix the set list up a little. So I needed to dig a little deeper. And I went, man, you ought to do that song. You haven't done it in years. And you almost never play it out. And people responded big time. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I went, it's actually old. I mean, I wrote it over 40 years ago. So I submitted it with everything. I didn't tell Jim what we were going to record. I said, here's 16 songs. What do you think? And he came up with his list of 10. And I said, I actually came up with a list of 12. And we went around that for a while. Where he really wanted to just track 10 songs. I wanted to track 12. But he, I won't say humored me. He indulged me. He let me do what I thought. And we ended up dumping those other 2 songs, figuring, you know what? They stick out. They don't fit on this record. Let's use those next time. And so it got canceled down to 10 songs. But that's, even that right there is part of the process. Jim is really skilled, which means you don't spend a lot of time overthinking. You feel and go, okay, this is what I need to do. But you don't go, well, what about this? What about this compared to that? And maybe we should try that. We don't work that way. We get a vibrant feeling about something. We might change our minds later, but that's a whole different process. In this case, we just executed, we threw down.
And does that song still resonate for you? Like, I mean, are you still able to kind of feel the power? And
as I'm listening to it, I'm kind of going, dude, you wrote a little better than you, because I had abandoned the song from the first part of my career. And he goes, this is actually a better song than you think it is. There are still elements of it that where I hear the naive 21-year-old and they kind of make me cringe. But they don't make audiences cringe. They just appreciate the sincerity and the ray of hope that's in there as this person's talking about this other person who seems to be lost.
Yeah. And how's the response been from the album so far? I know it just was released.
Well, the reviews have been better than ever. The reviews have been the best reviews of my whole career. Sales have been brisk. Radio has stalled. We promoted it to Americana and non-commercial AAA, and it seemed to be it seems like it's kind of heading downward after it didn't really crack the charts much. But the reviews are great. The reviews are absolutely stellar, to be honest, and kind of the best I've ever had. So I'm going to go with that and do my best to sell enough to make it worthwhile. It already is. That's the crazy part. If I don't sell another record, I'm still glad I did it the way that I did it. And so that actually sort of, kind of informs the whole thing.
Yeah. You're happy with it, right? That's what matters at the end of the day. I mean, obviously.
I'm thrilled and a little dumbfounded. I mean, I kind of listen going, where the hell did that come out of me from? But I know that I was singing well. I mean, I take better care of my body, so I sing better, especially when the red light's on. And it just, the songs all gelled and felt good together. The running order was pretty easy, even though we're burying the title track. It's because it really seemed more like a culmination of what we were saying rather than the kickoff.
Yeah, it comes later in the album. You mentioned working with Steve Pastel. Him being on this album. You also have Russ and Leland from the immediate family on there, and those are great guys, by the way. I got to interview the whole band early in COVID. We did 6-person Zoom thing. I wasn't sure how that would work, but but it was great.
They're the absolute best.
Yeah.
I love them. They're good friends. Yeah. And I'm honored to know them because I know Russell and Leland and Danny's background, I mean, the people they've played with and the people they've hung out with as they're playing is pretty impressive. So to be anywhere near them is pretty heartening.
Oh, I told him at the end, I was like, I got to talk to each of you easily for an hour, you know, and but having them all at once, you know, you get to hear all that sampling of all the stories that they have, which are endless for sure. So it's really cool. Yeah, one other thing I wanted to talk to you. Well, it kind of segues in a little bit, but your cousin Dave Navarro, you you taught him his first strings and guitar, right?
I taught him his first 3 guitar chords so that he could do something, so that he could actually assemble, you know, play backing on some songs. He took guitar lessons on top of that and became a monster player pretty young. He was kind of known as the best teen guitar player on the west side of Los Angeles when he was 14 or 15, really by the time he was about 15. And, you know, the best kid guitar player in town. He pursued it really hard. He worked really hard. He got his skill set up. But I did teach him his first 3 chords when he was about 10. And that was, you know, try this, try that. And something did click in his head. I don't claim to have taught him how to play guitar. But getting to the point where, and he said this actually publicly, that feeling of having that door opened and made real blew his mind and caused him to dedicate himself as he has and become not just the star, but the guitar player and musician that he is.
That's incredible. And was it through him that you kind of interacted with the Foo Fighters?
Yes, I mean, that would have been through him.
Yeah. What was that experience for you?
Well, the only one that I actually met was Taylor, and I have to tell you, him being gone is heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. He could not have been a nicer guy to me. You know, very upbeat, a lot of energy. A guy who was clearly happy to be doing what he was doing, and you know, it turned out that he and I had known. I mean, we had his first big gig as a player was with Sass Jordan, the Canadian rocker who I'm friends with. And so he knew about me, and I knew about him. But then we met up only 7 or 8 years ago. But he was great. His loss is absolutely tragic.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm a big Foo Fighters fan, and I've met Dave a couple of times, you know, and I mean, I had one. I mean, I didn't meet Taylor, but I was backstage at a Foo Fighters show waiting to meet Dave, and you know, and it was just 2005. I was really young, right? And so Taylor comes out first, and you know, and I'd gotten Taylor's set list, but I was just like, my eyes are set on Dave. You know, I was waiting for Dave to come out. So Taylor and I kind of locked eyes, and I was like, you know, I regret it now. It's a regret, of course, right? Which I don't have many, but I was like, I just I let him pass and waited for Dave to come out and meet him. But, you know, I've seen Taylor and the Foo Fighters play a lot of times, and Taylor has such passion and energy in his playing. And to what you said, it is absolutely a loss.
It's tragic. It's really tragic. He was a great guy. You know, there's no other word to use for it. Dave Navarro and I have not even spoken of it. I know that it's so painful for him. I mean, he knows that I sent him condolences instantly upon seeing it come across my notifications on my phone. And I mean, I just immediately sent him a text, and he didn't respond. We spoke briefly a couple of months back on something completely different, and he hasn't mentioned it. And you know, I've reiterated to him how sorry I am and how hard it must be and how much I love him. So I mean, if based on that he hasn't responded, then as far as I'm concerned, it's his business, and he has to deal with his grief his own way.
And you feel for Dave Grohl so much to have, you know, lost his best friend twice. You know, I mean, and I just hope they find a way to move forward. You know, but.
I suspect they will. I mean, I think the hard part is it might not be called Foo Fighters because it was so identified that way. And he doesn't necessarily need to do it. Having come out of Nirvana into a band that's arguably the best rock band in America, possibly even the world. You know, I mean, it sure is up there with U2 to me. But in terms of the best American rock band, especially with Petty passed on,
Yeah.
Does he really need to do it? Does he really feel it? Or will it be simply too painful inside the loss of what he's had to endure?
Watching the tribute, I'm thinking like, okay, they can pull in Andy Bushell, the 12-year-old from England, or Taylor's son. Either of them would be fire in that band, and it would be a way forward. But that's their decision, of course, right? So
they'll figure it out. I think that a lot of it's going to depend on what material Dave writes and how he feels about it. The first Foo Fighters record he did alone, which means he could choose to do a new project alone under a whole different name. That's why we are creative, is we get to keep recasting the die, reinventing the wheel, become whatever it is at that moment. When you're commercially successful, there's a lot of pressure to keep the brand going. But my suspicion, because I don't know him, but my suspicion is that he will choose to keep the brand going, because if it matters to him, otherwise he'll change the brand. As to whether he's going to stop making music, I don't see that happening.
I don't see it. No. He's already played shows with other, other people kind of showed up here and there. Like, he can't stop. Right. He's got to stop, and that's what makes him great.
Exactly.
Well, so Dan, I understand you're open to playing a song as we kind of close out.
Sure. Is there anything you'd like to hear in particular? Otherwise, let me just see.
I'm open to whatever you got, but "Come Around January Child" is a beautiful, beautiful song. So whatever you're feeling.
I'm going to move a little bit so they can see the hands for a second.
There you go.
January's child is weeping, swears that she will never find her way. February's child is sleeping, 'cause it's much too hard to face another day. Come around like the seasons come around with the years. I'll never be the same for all that's coming through my tears. But if you should come around, well, I'll be here. March's child is lost in a daydream, doesn't want to think of where she's been. April sets the young one on to traveling, seems as good a time as any to begin again. Come around like the seasons come around with the years. I'll never be the same for all that's coming through my tears. But if you should come around, well, I'll be here. Maybe comes a month for I don't wonder of everything you ever thought was real. And June, tell me, can she hear the thunder out of someone who is asking her, begging her to feel? Come around like the seasons come around with the years. I'll never be the same for all that's coming through my tears. But if you should come around, well, I'll be here. Well, if you should come around, well, I'll be here. A little
Beautiful.
lyric fault in there someplace, but it proves that it's like the little thing they stick in the wallets where they go, you know, the occasional flaw means this is a real hide and not a piece of plastic. So definitely the joy of live music.
Exactly, right? It's live. It's beautiful. So,
well, thank you, my friend.
I love it. Well, Dan, I want to thank you for taking the time today. I definitely appreciate it. And it's so great to hear your story and your experiences from the years and life on the road as well. You know, I mean, you have another leg of the tour coming up, right? And then a Spanish album that you're doing too.
A Spanish record that I'm going to start in January. There's a lot going on. It's been remarkable to be this busy at this stage of my life, and I'm a grateful man. I work hard. I've been blessed by some of the finest people in the world to work with, and people who allow me to keep doing it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to keep playing it out until I run out of gas. But so far, that ain't happening.
No kidding. I love it. And what can you tell us about the Spanish album?
Spanish album, basically, I'm going to call Corazón Lucero, which Corazón is, of course, the heart, and Lucero is a light source. It's a beam of light. But it's also my mother's maiden name was Lucero, and my grandmother's maiden name was Corazón. So I'm going to write a story, haven't finished the song yet, about a true love that is exemplified through this heart star, this heart light source. And it'll be probably a classic Latino bolero, you know, boom, chicka, chip, boom, boom, chip, boom, chip, boom, chicka, chip, chip, boom, chip, boom, that kind of feel. I want to do a couple of classic old songs, probably Sabor a mí, maybe a song by Jose Alfredo Jimenez, like you know, El Rey, or something that Vicente Fernandez recorded. I want to translate a couple of my existing songs into Spanish. I'm going to do a version of All Along the Watchtower that actually I had sung for a TV series for Prison Break, and this was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. I get letters all the time going, we want more than 34 seconds of it, dude. And Fox would not release it. I said, look, I don't put it out on iTunes. Make it from the series Prison Break. And they didn't want to do it, which really annoyed me because I didn't really care what I got. I wasn't doing it for the royalties. I was doing it to put it out there. Well, so guess what? Yeah. I'll put it out and I'll sell it. And
you'll put it out.
I'll put it out. My dream on that is to get the immediate family, and that's Leland and Russ and Danny and Steve and Waddy Wachtel, to back me on that and record it. It'll take us a day, if that. You know, just bang the thing out and see what it is. So from that standpoint, this is what I hope to do. And with I want Carlos Murguia, who's an amazing B3 player who's on my album, and a singer that I've worked with for years on projects. He's singing in Encanto. He's got one of the solo lines. You know, he told me my hair would fall out. Now look at my head, was his line in We Don't Talk About Bruno. He's a buddy and he's really good, and he's a known and experienced producer. So I've told him I want him to produce the record, and we'll get this baby made and get it put out next year.
I love it. Well, Dan, thank you. And thank you for your time today. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and good luck with everything ahead. You're not slowing down and not stopping, and your music's beautiful. So thanks for sharing.
I appreciate that, my friend. Take care, and thanks for having me.
That was the interview with Dan Navarro here on Concert Pipeline. And that takes us to the final segment on the program, the music news. Couple of stories for you about what's going on in the music world. Let's see which one I want to do first. I want to do this one because it's fun. So Lil Nas X paused his a gig in Atlanta temporarily to take a mean shit backstage. He said, "I'm going to be like a minute or two, and I'll be right back, he told the crowd over the venue's speakers. And yeah, he was playing at the Coca-Cola Roxy on Tuesday, the 27th, as part of his Long Live Montero tour, when a call from nature paused the gig. He had 3 costume changes in interludes during the show, and he remained off stage for a few minutes with his voice then coming through the venue speakers. He told the crowd, "I'm backstage and this is not part of the show, but I'm taking a mean shit." Hopefully he didn't leave the mic on while that act was happening, but who knows. But then he came back afterwards and continued the show. So I guess he was able to relieve himself and take care of business, which is, it's pretty funny. It's not a headline that you usually see for a news story, so I wanted to include it. I thought it was pretty great. Depeche Mode have shared a teaser for for an announcement that they have this week. We'll be hearing about. I don't know exactly what it is, but there have been photos, I guess, of Martin Gore and Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode in a studio working on new music. So it might have something to do with some new Depeche Mode music. I'll keep that story as a question mark because I don't have anything more to add than that. We did lose someone in the music world that had quite a presence and made an impact for a lot of people, and that is Coolio. He died at age 59. I learned about it through Weird Al's post with a picture with Coolio. Weird Al, of course, did Amish Paradise, the parody of Gangster's Paradise, right? The cause of death was not immediately available for Coolio's death, but I know a lot of people are saddened by his loss. So, good, that's his way. I have a multi-level story that I'm going to interweave into each other, and it has to do with the Foo Fighters' second tribute show for Taylor Hawkins, the late great Taylor Hawkins that died recently. And they did the show in LA at the Kia Theater, and I really wanted to go to that show. I wanted that to be the one that I fly down to LA for and go to and get to experience and be in that room for those magical moments where there's just such an energy there, right? That would have been amazing. I couldn't get a ticket, couldn't do it. So I wanted, so I was hoping to be able to live stream it and watch it, and it was announced that it would be live streamed through a couple sources. Well, that didn't happen either. So I tried to find something on YouTube, but it didn't cut it. So I haven't seen a lot of this show, but I'll bring news of a couple pieces of it, right? The first and most interesting part, I think, of the show is it has to do with Kesha. She reveals a vocal cord was damaged at Taylor Hawkins' tribute gig, and this is what she said. So in the middle of my wardrobe malfunction, I decided to distract everyone from my titties falling out by singing really loud. So she hemorrhaged her vocal cords. She took to the stage to perform a rendition of David Bowie's Heroes. That's one that, no, I don't know if that's one. Actually, I don't think that's the one that Taylor Hawkins did, but he was a big fan of Bowie. And he did it with, she was performing with Hawkins' cover band, Chevy Metal, and while performing, as she said, she damaged her vocal cords. And she said today she found out she hemorrhaged one of her vocal cords. So I'm posting all the pics from the fucking moment because this was quite a moment. She wrote on Instagram alongside a photo of the performance. So I'm not sure if you can find any pictures online of the wardrobe malfunction, so to speak, but might have to take a look. She said it was an overwhelming day for everyone. I've never played anything like that in terms of the London concert, and I'm sure I seem like one of the more random choices to take part, but I've been friends with the band for ages. Many other people performed, including Alanis Morissette, Miley Cyrus, members of Queen, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Chris Novoselic from Nirvana, Led Zeppelin bassist John Paul Jones, Pink, Nandi Bushell, Soundgarden's Kim Lethal, and The Darkness Justin Hawkins. They say Nandi Bushell, which is interesting. I don't know if Nandi actually played or not. I couldn't find anything about that. I do have a story about Nandi. She shared The Shadows, a new song that was written for her dad. She wrote the track for her father, John, while he was battling health issues. And she's 12 years old, so this is a pretty deep topic, right? But she's also wise and developed beyond her years. I mean, musically, I mean, she's incredible. So, and she keeps learning new instruments to play. And she played at the Taylor Hawkins show at Wembley Stadium earlier this month. And she said, early in 2022, my dad fell into a depression as his autoimmune disease worsened. It was a difficult time for our family. I wanted to help cheer my dad up by writing a song for him. He would describe his feelings to me and I would put them into lyrics, letting him know I would be there for him. My dad is now doing much better. He's on medication that is helping with his autoimmune disease, and he's recovered from his depression. She also said, if you are suffering from mental health issues, please reach out for help. Your love, there is hope. I don't know if people actually recover from depression fully. I'm no medical expert, but I think it's not something that just kind of goes away after a couple months. I think it takes a lot of work. So I don't know how much she knows about how deep that goes, but I think she's seeing improvements, and that's what matters there. And so back to the Foo Fighters show. It was a 6-hour musical love fest in Los Angeles. It was even longer than the show in England, and there were so many artists that performed. I want to go through kind of the set list and share kind of a rundown of who performed, because it's just so epic for all this to happen in one night. It's crazy. It started with Dave Grohl's daughter, Violet Grohl, opening with Hallelujah, and Joan Jett joined the Foo Fighters for some of her songs, The Runaways. Travis Barker was on drums there for that performance as well. Chevy Metal, as I mentioned, did an AC/DC cover, a Bowie cover, and a Yes cover. Justin Hawkins from The Darkness and Josh Freese and the Coattail Riders did some songs. They from Taylor Hawkins, and as well as, I believe, in a thing called Love by the Darkness. James Gang performed a couple songs. Mark Ronson and Andrew Wyatt with Dave Grohl performed a song. Them Crooked Vultures did a few songs. An Elton John cover, Queens of the Stone Age cover. Wolfgang Van Halen played a couple of Van Halen songs, including Hot for Teacher. Def Leppard and Foo Fighters and Patrick Wilson performed with Miley Cyrus. They did Photograph. Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee of Motley Crue did a couple of Crue covers. The Cars played a couple of songs. Pink and Nancy Wilson did Barracuda by Heart. Oh my gosh, this goes on and on, right? Stuart Copeland performed Next to You by the Police, and Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic as well by the Police. Alanis Morissette came out for a song. She performed You Ought to Know. Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers was on drums for that. Sebastian Bach and Geezer Butler and Lars Ulrich did some Sabbath covers, including Paranoid. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson did some Rush covers. Soundgarden and Taylor Momsen, Nirvana did a couple of Soundgarden songs, including Black Hole Sun. Then came out Queen to rock with the Foo Fighters. They did We Will Rock You, Under Pressure, Somebody to Love, as well as a couple of other songs. And then the Foo Fighters take the stage finally 42 songs into the evening to play another 10 songs or so after that point. And they did a lot of their hits and brought on other people and lots of other drummers. Travis Barker came out again. Brad Wilk did from Rage Against the Machine came out. I don't even think he was listed. Patrick Wilson, Dave Chappelle and Patrick Wilson did Creep, a Radiohead cover with the Foo Fighters. And who else we got? And then it closed out with Chad Smith performing Everlong with the Foo Fighters. And that was a 53 song show. The last one made it 50 songs in England. So epic evening. And would have been amazing to be a fly on the wall for that performance. So what's next for the Foo Fighters? It's hard to say. No idea. We talked about it with Dan a little bit in the interview about what might be, but no way to really know for sure. That's our show for today. So thanks for tuning in. As I mentioned earlier, we have Drew McManus on the program next week. So that should be fun. And for all of us here at Concert Pipeline, I'm Steve Jones. We'll catch you next time.